Good morning, everybody. We want to welcome you to the museum this morning. My name is Ruth Snar, and I'm on the, well, I'm not on the board of directors, but I'm on the committee to get these speakers coming, and we want to welcome you. Our museum was completed in 1983 as a place to house all the historical records and artifacts from the early pioneers that settled here. And we invite you to, when we're done here, I don't know how many have not been upstairs to the museum, to go upstairs and see the museum and what we have upstairs. We are supported by the St. George City Rat Tax, the Washington County Rat Tax, and the Utah Arts and Museum. And we ask that if you would please turn off your phones. So I put mine in the other room so it won't ring. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about John. John is my neighbor, and he sang in the Tabernacle Choir for how many years?
9 years.
5 years?
9.
9 years, yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, John was born in Los Angeles, California, but grew up here in St. George. When he was a junior in high school, a girl in his class invited him to try out for the college musical, Oklahoma. And it hadn't even occurred to John to do that. Well, he went, and they were knocked out of their socks, sort of thing, by his voice. Anyway, the director was the legendary Marion Bentley. Those who are probably raised here in St. George would know her because she was very famous. Yeah. John was surprised to see everyone. Oh, okay, I said that. He was Curly in Oklahoma. Is it Caliph? Caliph in Kismet. The Boyfriend in The Boyfriend, Mr. Snow in Carousel, and yeah, sorry, I'm trying to, it's me that can't read. John graduated from Dixie, then went on to BYU, and from there, Syracuse University, and earned his doctorate in humanities. He met his wife Karen at BYU, and they have 10 children. In 1991, John survived the extensive audition process for the Tabernacle Choir, and I know what he went through because I went through, but John got in and I didn't. They lived in Provo at the time, so he carpooled every week up to Salt Lake every Thursday night for the 2-hour practice session at the Y. Let's see. He was a professor at BYU. He didn't write that down, in the humanities, and he loved every minute of singing in the Tabernacle Choir. So I'm going to turn the time over to John.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Great. A line from Shakespeare comes to mind. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters, from Henry V. Anyway, glad to have all of you here. This is the topic of our presentation today. It's really an honor for me to be here, and I'm grateful for Ruth, our neighbor and our dear friend, for how many years now? 13, 14 years in Green Springs in Washington. Just to recap a couple of things that she started to talk to you about. My parents encouraged me to take piano lessons when I was 7. That was the beginning of my love affair with music. Later on, I played trumpet in Stan. Anybody remember Stan Smoots? Yeah, some of you do. He was a legendary band director, used to throw chalk and erasers at the trumpet section for not playing loud enough. Anyway, so I played with him for a few years, and then we had the college musicals. I also played an evil prince, Shawisky, in Mussorgsky's Boris Godunov, a very famous opera. And I performed with Jerome Hines, who was a legendary metropolitan baritone. And when I was at BYU, just maybe 3 or 4 years after I got there, it was a great experience. Anyway, my 9 years with the choir was just so important and for my life. It was, I guess, my all-time, what would you call it, epiphany to be a member of that choir for 9 years. It was just a wonderful experience. So I'm going to begin today. I've got 2 able helpers here. My wife is going to narrate the white stuff on the screen. Yes? Is my mic working? Brad?
Yes.
They can't hear me.
It's not coming out the PA system, but I can hear you on the video.
Oh, they can't hear you.
Yeah, just talk a little.
I'll talk a little louder. Is that good?
Just
Use
project
your
a little bit louder.
university.
Okay. I could sing, and then you could hear me for sure. We could have a little recitative in the opera for a second. Okay, so let's begin. Oh, I was going to mention that my wife will be narrating the white stuff on the screen, and my dear friend Lauren Weissman will be narrating the green quotes on the screen because he's got such a wonderful voice. Okay, let's begin. So, first, what is magic about music? This is called the magic of music. What is magic about music? Any ideas?
It's the universal language. It brings peace and wonderment into our lives every time music is played. Any kind of music, whatever.
Even acid rock?
Pardon?
Even acid rock?
Well, if somebody likes it.
Somebody likes it, right? Yeah.
Well, I feel the Spirit of the Holy Ghost more singing than I do on most other occasions.
Isn't that curious? You can look at a painting and be moved by it, but it doesn't quite hit you in the solar plexus like music does. So let's just talk about that for just a minute. This is what, Karen, go ahead and read that for us.
It has a lot to do with the differences between the brain and the heart, between simply conveying information and communicating emotion.
I could go on and say, of all the arts I have taught, I taught at BYU for 35 years, the major art forms. Karen and I just got back from Portugal, and we both caught bad colds, and so we're just getting over them. I don't think I'm contagious right now, so we're all right, even you in the front row. So, of all the arts I have taught, music was the most powerful. For example, here are 2 ways to say those magical 3 words, I love you. I love you. Or, I love you. So, can you see the voice inflections and the gestures carry more weight than the words, actually? Because of the sounds of the voice, which is a kind of music, rising and falling of the intonations of a speaking voice is very close to opera, actually. So you can see how voice inflections and gestures carry the real meaning behind the words we say and the gestures we use to say those words. In fact, the nonverbal stuff can actually convey the opposite message, right? I love you. No, you don't really love me. So, let's go to the next slide. It has 2 presentations of these parts. I'll let my wife read the white stuff.
Tracing the history of the choir's directors from the Bowery to the present. Tracing the major musical turning point of John's life, serving 9 years as first tenor.
Can you hear her?
Yes.
Good. So here are some just brief beginnings of the tabernacle, of the choir.
at the dedication of the Kirtland Temple on March 27, 1836.
So the choir was seated in the four corners of the Kirtland Temple at that time, and they sang William Phelps' commissioned hymn called "The Spirit of God Like a Fire is Burning." That was the first time that was ever sung. On our tour, when I was with the choir in the Midwest, the Tabernacle Choir sang this hymn as we filled the Kirtland Temple to capacity. You can imagine 400 people sitting in that major room in the middle of the building. It was difficult to sing because we were so deeply moved by the music we were singing. You can't sing and cry at the same time. We discovered that pretty quickly.
A choir sang for a conference in the Nauvoo Temple in April 5 through 8, 1844. Just 1 month and 3 days after the saints' arrival in the Salt Lake Valley on July 24, 1847, a choir sang in the Bowery on August 27, 1847. John Perry became the first conductor of the Tabernacle Choir in 1849.
So here's the backstory to the first 5 choir directors.
5 conductors guided the choir through its infancy, a period of 2 decades which ended with the completion of the new tabernacle, that is in Salt Lake City, right? All 5 served without remuneration, but with great distinction. Only 1 was a native-born American, the remaining 4 having come from Great Britain, 1 from North Wales, 1 from Ireland, and 2 from England. Only 1 was a professional musician.
Here are the 5 early directors.
John Perry was Welsh, as were most of the original members of the choir. Many early converts from Wales were miners who had a strong tradition of choir singing in underground caves that greatly magnified the resonance of their voices. Stephen H. Goddard, a noted singer and native of New York, had been a warden of the School of Music at Nauvoo University and served 5 years from 1849 to 1854. James Smithies was a widely known English convert to the church and was a close friend of Brigham Young. He was 46 at the time of his appointment and served 6 years, 1856 to 1862, the longest term of the early conductors. Charles John Thomas was appointed the 4th director in 1862 at the age of 30. He had been director of one of 3 smaller choirs that alternated singing in general conferences. He was the first to have made a professional career in music. Brigham Young later appointed him as musical director of his favorite artistic venture, the Salt Lake Theater. Robert Sands, an Irishman, moved the choir from the old tabernacle to its new home. He was 37 at the time and served for only 4 years before being succeeded by the first truly accomplished Mormon conductor to follow, George Edward Percy Careless, in 1869. In General Conference in 1869, Brigham Young stood up and announced,
"Brother George, I have a mission for you. I want you to take the Tabernacle Choir and the theater orchestra and lay the foundation for good music in Utah."
George Careless accepted the call with enthusiasm. Brother Brigham had already made clear his deep commitment to fostering elevated music in the church. Here's his famous quote.
"There is no music in hell," he says. So typical of Brother Brigham. For all good music belongs to heaven. Sweet, harmonious sounds give exquisite joy to human beings capable of appreciating music. I delight in hearing harmonious tones made by the human voice, by musical instruments, and by both combined. Every sweet musical sound that can be made belongs to the saints and is for the saints.
1 year after Careless's appointment in 1869, the Deseret News announced,
The singing during conference has elicited general and well-merited praise and commendation.
by October 8, 1873, the saints heard the first truly substantial Mormon Tabernacle choir at General Conference, which comprised a total of 304 singers in all. Ebenezer Beasley served 1880 to 1889. If the mission of George Careless was to build a foundation of good music in the church, it was Ebenezer Beasley who preserved it from destruction. Beasley, a native of Oxfordshire, England, was the 6th of 7 choir directors born in Great Britain.
On his handcart trek to Salt Lake across the plains, he led the pioneers in song on the trail by day and around the campfire with his flute by night.
By all accounts, the handcart song was the favorite of the trip.
This is how it goes. Some must push and some must pull as we go marching up the hill, as merrily on the way we go until we reach the
Valley-O.
Valley-O.
The impact of the Edmunds-Tucker Act on the choir in 1890. In 1890, the Supreme...
Oh, see, I need to say one little thing there. The period of heady accomplishment in the choir began during the life of Brigham Young and was abruptly brought to an end in the 1880s as Congress took determined steps to stop the practice of polygamy. It had severe ramifications for the church and the choir.
In 1890, the Supreme Court upheld the provisions of the Edmunds-Tucker Act, which had dissolved the church, decimating the tenor and bass sections of the choir, with many brethren put in jail or forced into hiding. Beasley faced these difficult times with patience and grace, which endeared him to everyone. He retired in 1889 and was succeeded by Evan Stevens. President Wilford Woodruff's manifesto in 1890, officially disallowing polygamy, opened the door to the choir's future growth. Stevens served from 1890 to 1916. Born in Wales, 12-year-old Evan Stevens found the 1,000-mile trek across the Great Plains to Utah a great adventure. He later wrote,
The journey across the plains was such an experience of pleasure to me that I found it difficult to sympathize with the pioneers who found it a hardship. I was too elated to walk, so I would run ahead, and then I would stop and wait for the crowd.
He was to run for the rest of his life, his energy increasing as he grew older.
Even as a very young man, Stevens was already the master of a unique kind of inspirational leadership. And it was this ability which colored all of his contributions to Utah's musical life and is why he stands as a giant of early Utah music. In fact, he has been called the father of Mormon music. At the age of 36, he would become the most significant conductor in the annals of the Tabernacle Choir. But not even Evan's enthusiasm could rid him of the bane of every voluntary musical organization, regular attendance. Can you believe this? By the time Stevens succeeded Beasley, fewer than 300 members of the 600 would actually attend a rehearsal or a performance. Singing in the choir had not yet been recognized as an important church service.
The impact of the Salt Lake Temple dedication and the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. In 1893, the choir participated in 2 pivotal events which marked turning points in its greater impact on the church and its outreach to a much wider audience. The dedication of the Salt Lake Temple on April 6th, and 5 months later, their departure to Chicago World's Fair on August 29. After President Wilford Woodruff's dedicatory prayer, the choir answered with Evan Stevens' own composition, the Hosanna Anthem, which has been used at every subsequent temple dedication as the congregants wave handkerchiefs at the singing of the word, Hosanna.
How many of you have actually experienced one of those? Hosanna, Hosanna to God and the Lamb. It's wonderful.
The impact of the Chicago World's Fair. At 3:10 p.m. on August 29, 250 choir members and 100 relatives and friends boarded a special 10-car train in Salt Lake City to travel halfway across America to Chicago to participate in a choral competition called the Eisteddfod, a traditional Welsh gathering of the bards. Even though they only received second place, the choir's dazzling success was captured in Second Counselor Joseph F. Smith's memorable line in a letter home to his wife.
Their performance has done more good than 5,000 sermons would have done.
And here we see the choir boarding a train at the Salt Lake City Railroad station to leave for Chicago. This was 1893.
Things have changed in the median.
Anthony C. Lund served from 1916 to 1935. In 1916, the conductor's baton passed from Evan Stevens to the choir's first Utah-born director, Anthony C. Lund, who, along with two superb organists, Frank Asper and the immigrant wunderkind Alexander Schreiner, would carry on the choir's concert tours, direct its next recordings, and in 1929 launch the historic series of network radio broadcasts, which would make the music of the Tabernacle Choir and organ accessible to virtually every home in the United States.
Although he didn't possess the elemental excitement of Stevens' late recordings, he excelled in music which requires control and subtlety. He molded the choir's delivery with crisper diction and subtle tempos and phrasing in the European mold.
Richard L. Evans. The choir's first nationwide broadcast aired on Monday, July 15, 1929, from 3 o'clock to 3:30 in the afternoon, and eventually brought a new indispensable personality into the choir's broadcasts. The announcer Richard L. Evans, of whom Alexander Schreiner said simply,
He was the choir's patron saint.
Truly.
J. Spencer Cornwall served from 1935 to 1957. Few Tabernacle Choir conductors have been as deeply loved as the kind, soft-spoken, slender, white-haired J. Spencer Cornwall. John interviewed him early in his career as a BYU humanities professor and can attest that this is a more than accurate description of his appearance and demeanor.
When I was a boy,
Cornwall remembers.
Evan Stevens was my idol.
Since Cornwall's career as choir conductor was contemporary with Evans's, what he said about Evans was universally felt.
Richard L. Evans was one of the greatest men, as a man, that I have ever been with. He had more personality and more good advice and more wisdom than anybody else.
Richard L. Evans had a singular impact on the choir by single-handedly creating the music and the spoken word broadcasts, a unique blend of spoken word and music, which has continued to be the hallmark of the program, a 2 to 3 minute non-denominational sermon that has been aptly called a haiku of Christian thought.
In describing how he became director of the Tabernacle Choir, Cornwall recalls the day when President Heber J. Grant called him into his office and said,
Last night at our meeting, we elected you Tabernacle Choir Director. What have you got to say about that?
He thought about it for a day and accepted. Over time, Cornwall became very concerned with the uneven quality of the broadcast, since there was no way to actually hear what was being broadcast. So he labored quietly and doggedly to transfer all the recording equipment into the Tabernacle from the radio station. In general, Cornwall brought the format of the Tabernacle Choir broadcast into the 20th century by getting away from the opera excerpts and sentimental gospel songs that had been a large part of the choir's earlier broadcasts, and moving toward music specifically written for a choir in a liturgical setting. The choir's finest hour as a broadcast institution under Cornwall's direction came on April 12, 1945, the day Franklin Delano Roosevelt died. Columbia Network asked the choir to perform a memorial broadcast that evening. CBS called from New York asking how long it would take to get everything in order. A KSL official told him the choir was already assembled. Incredible was all he said. The choir broadcasted 5 numbers on 143 stations, a significant example of the level of musicianship the choir had attained. Today's Tabernacle Choir, known throughout the world by its media exposure and live appearances, was significantly shaped by J. Spencer Cornwall. Richard P. Condy served from 1957 to 1974. He was assistant conductor of the Tabernacle Choir for 20 years, but conducted few broadcasts. At the same time, he held a position at the University of Utah, teaching and conducting. Then, in 1957, President David O. McKay asked Condy to be acting conductor of the choir when Cornwall retired. Condy, unlike Cornwall, was an outgoing, highly charged man who sang tenor in Puccini operas early in his musical career. At age 59, he became the 11th conductor of the Tabernacle Choir and would remain its leader for 17 years. Condy's conception of the ideal choral tone was sharply different from Cornwall's. While Cornwall was fond of the purity of children's voices, Condy preferred the rich resonance of trained soloists, like opera singers or Italian immigrants singing their native folk songs. As a result, Condy created what is often called the Tabernacle Choir sound, namely a rich, romantic choral tone, heavy with feeling and vibrato. John said,
My early youth was graced by the old 78 records my mother used to play on Sundays after church, which I grew to love, never dreaming that one day I would be a member of that august organization.
Most important for his legacy, Condy developed a rare collaboration in the 50s and 60s between the Tabernacle Choir and the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra under the direction of Eugene Ormandy, which led to many wildly popular record albums, the most popular of which was The Lord's Prayer, featuring the Battle Hymn of the Republic, that President Reagan requested be sung at his inauguration in 1984, which endeared the choir to him. This short excerpt from a news feed dramatized the choir's impact for the whole nation.
Before I show you this, it's not a very good recording because it's taken from a secondary source, but I probably about 2 months ago, I actually found myself sitting next to Merrill Osmond. He was one of the original Osmond brothers who sang for Walt Disney for many years. Became, of course, Donnie and Marie became famous from that group. But anyway, I was talking to him about this recording, and he said, "Oh, let me give you the backstory. Reagan insisted that the choir sing for his inauguration, and the people in charge of the program were not at all excited about that. They didn't think the church was that important, or that the choir was that important. So they finally relented and let him do it. But he said, if you're going to have them on the float, don't let the float stop in the front of the podium where Reagan's standing. Keep it going, keep it going." Well, Merrill said, "I just couldn't imagine that working, that the choir sound would not be nearly as impressive if you just had it going by with them singing that song." So he bribed the tractor driver of the float. And so he stopped right in front of Reagan. This is what you're going to see now is the reaction to that by Reagan himself. Love that.
Trying hard not to cry, it looked like. Gerald Otley served from 1974 to 1999. When Gerald Otley was appointed assistant conductor of the Tabernacle Choir in 1974, he could hardly have imagined how soon his life would be changed. 3 other assistant conductors had previously ascended to the directorship: Ebenezer Beasley, Richard Conde, and Dr. J.E. Welch, but it would be years before Otley might get the nod. Conde gave his assistant, J. Welch, regular assignments at general conferences and in broadcasts. When Welch was appointed director, he continued this practice with Otley. 6 months later, J. Welch resigned for personal reasons, and Otley became acting director in December, then director by April 1975.
By the end of 1975, virtually an entirely new team was installed at the Tabernacle, including Don Ripplinger as assistant director, John Longhurst joining Robert Kundick as organist, and J. Spencer Kennard having succeeded Richard L. Evans as commentator, and Oakley S. Evans as choir president. Brother Smoot was the choir president when I was in the choir, and once said that President Hinckley greeted him at their monthly meeting with, "Well, President Smoot, how is the crown jewel of the church today?" So he had a high estimation of his choir and the power of the choir to turn hearts.
During his 25 years at the helm of the choir, Otley fulfilled the organization's defining charge to bring joy, peace, and healing to its worldwide audiences. He made several significant alterations that changed the choir and still ripples through it today, over 25 years after his retirement. 2 of Otley's significant changes. Otley helped formulate the choir's existing policy of singers retiring at age 60 or following 20 years of service, whichever came first. Why?
The reason is that especially the high sopranos, when they get over 60, their voices, which used to be a vibrato, become what Jerry called a wobblato, kind of a wobbly sound that would go up and down. You can't harmonize with voices like that. So all of us, and I think tenors probably would be the second group that would maybe get a wobblato later in life. But we all have to retire at 60 or after 20 years of service.
Can I add something to your
Surely.
knowledge base? I, as a young man, was in Mormon Youth Symphony Choir with J. Welch as the conductor. And when he became the conductor of the Tabernacle Choir, I was at lunch with him one day, and he said to me, "Some of these sopranos have vibratos you could drive a Mack truck to."
Yes, it's not fun to hear one sing. It's certainly not fun to try to harmonize with somebody that has that kind of a voice. Yeah. Thank you for that. It was wonderful. Go ahead, Karen.
He also implemented a more structured and formalized audition process. These changes allowed the amateur choir to realize new levels of musical professionalism. Otley was also key in formalizing a requirement that would-be choir members hold a current temple recommend. After this change, he acknowledged,
The choir turned into a powerful spiritual organization.
due in part to the spiritual impact of being set apart as musical missionaries. The seeming alliance between the church and the federal government under Reagan had a symbolic moment when, in November 1983, Lieutenant Colonel Craig Jessup, a former member of the choir under both Welch and Otley, brought his singing sergeants to the Tabernacle to sing for the choir. It was a tender epilogue to the Reagan inaugural, as well as a forecast of the choir's future. Jessup would eventually succeed Otley as the choir's conductor, followed by Mack Wilberg.
I have sung under Jerry Otley, Ripplinger, Mack Wilberg, and of course Jessup. I just wanted to make a comment about his conducting style. he was, I don't know, the most effective conductor I've ever sung under. And I kept thinking, what makes him so powerful? And I think part of it is his love of music and love of the choir. There were often times when I could see him going like this, trying to see the face of the person sitting behind a person that was a little bit taller than they were. He wanted to establish eye contact, and it's endeared him to all of us. We worked probably harder to get it right with him than any of the conductors that we had, including Mac Wilberg. They're all great conductors, but somehow Jessup had I would call it what do you call doctors that are?
Precision.
Have a good bedside manner. That's it. Oh, and when he left the choir, it ruined my day. I just thought, why? I have never found out. I've been interviewed many of my colleagues, and nobody seems to know, except Jessup and the president of the choir. Someday I'm hoping to know
why he left.
My major musical turning point came when I joined the choir in the fall of 1991. Qualifying for a position in the Tabernacle Choir was much more difficult than I had imagined. The first step was sending in a recording of your singing a hymn. My favorite hymn was I Need Thee Every Hour, so I sent that in. They liked the sound of my voice, so I got the second stage. Invited to an interview that involved sight singing a song with 3 members of the choir. For my case, it was a soprano, alto, and bass who were in the choir, and I got to sing some unknown song. I must have done okay. I got past that hurdle. If you passed, you were invited to take a rigorous theory practice exam that involved tests of your knowledge of music theory and being able to remember non-melodic series of sine tones, which I was sure I had failed. It ruined my day, and I went home. I drove home from Salt Lake, sure that I hadn't made the cut. What it required you to do on this particular part of the exam was to indicate on a check on a piece of paper whether one series of tones was the same as the second series of tones. Now, a sine tone is just a non-vibrato kind of sound that's mechanical. And it sounded something like bum 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 bum. And then they did it again, and there was maybe one note that was different. Had no clue, because it wasn't a melodic line, it was just a bunch of tones. Well, so I started guessing, and then I got to the bottom of the page and it said, whatever you do, don't guess. So I went home pretty discouraged. Since my retirement, the choir now requires every applicant to participate in a training choir before being accepted and set apart as a musical missionary. That's still the case. It's the last stage, and sometimes people don't make that for some reason or other. Sometimes it's not that their voice isn't beautiful, it's that it sticks out. It has to be a voice that blends with other people. From my first impression of rehearsing with this amazing choir, the first Thursday rehearsal of my tenure as first tenor, I was intensely aware of the spiritual impact of its sound. It was like being inside a room with quadraphonic speakers on every side, immersed in the glorious musical resonance that came from 360 amateur singers who had been set apart as musical missionaries. In retrospect, I invented a metaphor for the profound impact this choir has had on its audience over the years. Its performances are like a giant plow that softens the soil of the heart so that the seed of truth can be planted and begin to grow. In a nutshell, that's exactly what happens each time the choir sings for an audience. I joined the Tabernacle Choir in the fall of 1991 and left the choir 9 years later. Each site, that is the old Tabernacle on Temple Square and the new Conference Center, has its own unique acoustics due to its size, which became dramatically evident when we were rehearsing in the new building prior to President Hinckley's 95th birthday celebration in June of 2000, which was my last performance with the choir. So the sensitivity of the Tabernacle. One of my earliest memories of the Tabernacle Choir, or the Tabernacle, was visiting Temple Square with my father when I was a preteen. The guide had our group sit in the back seats on the main floor while she walked up to the choir seats and dropped a pin on the pulpit. Have any of you had that experience? Just wow, I couldn't believe it. It's amazing. I was astonished that we could hear the sound from clear across the tabernacle. Yet, compared to the new conference center's remarkable acoustics, the tabernacle's dome ceiling creates multi-directional echoes of the choir's sound. I have sat on the back row of the choir seats and could easily hear a couple conversing with each other on the 10th row of the congregation. Way farther, just as like it was right in back of me. It was amazing. Magic. Yes, the sound is resonant to the ear, but imprecise in terms of overtones. Now, the conference center is a different story. In preparation for my last performance of the choir, Craig Jessup had us file into the choir seats of the conference center the Thursday before the Saturday performance of President Hinckley's birthday party. We were to sing a hymn while slowly turning in place. As we performed this maneuver, I could see Craig looking up at the ceiling. I actually thought there was a bird up there somewhere. After we were finished, he said something like,
I can't believe the acoustics of this hall. I can hear overtones that I've never heard before in the tabernacle.
He went on to tell us that if we sing absolutely in tune, the combined sound of all our voices activates all the overtones in the choir sound, which creates the effect of another choir singing just above our heads. This reality made me think of the spiritual dimension of this physical phenomenon. We can do the same when we become a Zion society and are of one heart and mind about things eternal. So in conclusion, I would like to share with you the answer to a question that I often posed to myself during the time I was in the choir. What did I do to deserve this great blessing? It was about probably 3 or 4 months after I had joined the choir. In the middle of a broadcast, it came to me, because you went to ward choir practice every Thursday night when you were a little boy. I was the only tenor along with Leo Sullivan, one of my friends, and we were the only tenors in the choir. Melba Baker, bless her heart, used to have a beautiful voice, but she had a terrible wobulato, as we've talked about already, and I hated the sounds. I hated going to choir, and especially because I had to give up my fun night games with my friends on Thursday nights. I wasn't hardly willing to do that, but my mother made me go. Viola Gentry made me go, and so I went. And then I thought to myself, you mean I got this for that? It took me a while to get my head around that one. I thought to myself, I would have probably crawled across the Gobi Desert with my hands and knees to get to choir practice on Thursday nights if I had known I was going to be in the choir Sunday. And indeed, that brought me to one of my favorite personal parables, so here it is. This story illustrates a deeply personal parable, highlighting the incomparably generous nature of the God we worship. As with my choir experiences, where I received a reward that far exceeded my input in time and effort, so we are all beneficiaries of God's loving grace every day of our lives. When we do the hard stuff in pleasing Him and receive His reward, an eternal measure of love and joy that is both undeserved and often incomprehensible. This memorable quote from Elder Karen in his first talk as a general authority helped me better understand the Savior's divine measure of love for each of us. Our Father is in relentless pursuit of you. Really gets our attention, doesn't it? So our challenge is to let us all vow to internalize this one eternal verity as we interact and influence those around us in our families and neighborhoods, so that they may be able to feel this same divine generosity from us, with which we are beneficiaries from Him every day of our lives. So let me end where I began, with the unique impact of the choir's glorious sound. I mentioned earlier that during my first Thursday evening rehearsal, with the choir in the fall of 1991. I was astonished by the impact of singing inside the choir instead of listening to it from the audience. It was the total immersion in elevating music that overwhelmed me. This uplifting experience helped me better understand the impact of the choir's performances that had on audiences in the 1991 Eastern European tour my tenor colleagues had just returned from. They told me that after each performance, crowds of people would rush to the lip of the stage to learn more about the choir and the church. The choir members soon realized that these members of the audience had grown up in a godless society, never having felt the impact of the Spirit in their lives. The performance was their first immersion in the double impact of beautiful music conveyed by the Holy Spirit. This is a picture of the choir, photograph of the choir at their 5,000th broadcast on Sunday, July 13th, 2025. That's just a few months ago. The first episode aired in the summer of 1929, just months before the Great Depression hit. A single microphone, still connected by a long cable to the KZN radio, later KSL controller, a block away, was suspended from the ceiling of the Tabernacle. That humble beginning marked the start of a near-continuous broadcast that has endured for 96 years. In the words of the broadcast's current announcer and writer, Derek Porter, its glorious sound prevailed
throughout major world events, including World War II, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, who has spoken at the Tabernacle only weeks earlier, 9/11, and the COVID-10 pandemic.
A former choir conductor, Gerald Otley, once reflected,
a 30-member staff and dozens of others donate their time and talents. You can't get people to do for money what people are willing to do for their love of a cause.
That behind-the-scenes support is vital to keeping the weekly broadcast running smoothly. Choir members commit to a demanding schedule. All members are unpaid volunteers who balance full-time jobs, families, and a demanding rehearsal schedule to contribute to music and the spoken word week after week. According to Choir Facts, each member dedicates about 5 hours weekly, 2 hours on Thursday evening rehearsals, and more than 3 hours on Sunday mornings, in addition to tours and recordings. Participation requires early rehearsals, weekend availability, and the kind of reliability that doesn't waver with weather or personal convenience. So, adieu to a precious part of my life. It was somewhat traumatic to endure having to leave the choir when I was 60. It had become an almost indispensable source of emotional fulfillment that I never wanted to lose. I gradually learned to live without it by drowning my sorrows in volunteering to direct a BYU study abroad in Paris the following fall and pursuing missionary opportunities with my wife for the next 25 years. I still reserve each Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. to listen to the choir broadcast. It never fails to move me to tears by its music and its message. I invite you to enjoy the concluding song of the September 21st broadcast, actually composed by Mac Wilberg with text by David Warner, called Hymn of Praise, that a couple of months earlier celebrated its 5,000th broadcast. Whoops. Two things are different than when I was there. We didn't have an orchestra. We performed in some of our performances with the Utah Symphony, but it was a little disheartening to have them treat us like we were amateurs, which we were, of course. Now we've got our own orchestra. The other thing that's remarkable to me, I don't know how they do this, but they have it all memorized. Imagine that. We go through music like crazy. We just barely have enough time to get it learned, say nothing about get it memorized. They must drive in their car with earbuds and hearing again and again and again the words so that they would get them right, because it makes so much difference to see them look at the audience than looking at their text and the music. So it's remarkable. I don't know how that happens. I haven't talked to anybody about it, but it amazes me. Lifts my spirits as I hope it lifted yours. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. I think he did an awesome job. I mean, he did a lot of proven, work to get this. Did you sing in the J. Welch Chorale?
No, I was just in Mormon Symphony.
Okay, see, and I sang in the J. Welch Chorale, and I was singing in the chorale when I tried out for the choir. But anyway, thank you, John. Here's a little thank you note.
Thank you.
For all you've done, and thank you so much for coming, and invite you to go upstairs to the museum and look around and see what's up there.